Hi friends, welcome to my channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Caitlin and I like to do eyeshadow palette ranking and review videos as well as some other beauty content sprinkled in. So if any of those are things that you're interested in, then you should definitely hit that subscribe button. And for those of you that are not here, my face is happy that you're seeing me again. And yeah, I don't know why I struggle with that intro so much. I'm trying to find a good flow for it. I just realized I forgot to mention I like to post 1 to 2 videos a week for those of you that are new here. Anyways, not on a good flow yet. So I have seen lots of creators do this style of video. I don't know who originated it, but I did just see Katie Marie post it. So she was the one who most recently inspired me to do this video. So that's who I'm going to give credit to. I will link her video down in the description box. But I want to chat through, of the brands that I have 2 or more palettes of, which palette would I declutter if I was forced to declutter one. So if that sounds like something you would be interested in watching, you should definitely hit that like button, and let's go ahead and get on into it. I have like a cluster of palettes sitting next to me, so I'm gonna just start with, I kind of have the brands listed in alphabetical order, so that's, oh my god, I might have to declutter some of these because I'm breaking them. Okay, so first brand up is Ace Beauty. I have 4 palettes from them. I used to have the Flare palette. I decluttered that one. I gave it to a friend who I'm sure is getting more use out of it than I am, but that's the one palette that I've decluttered in my life that I'm like, man, I wish I still had that. So anyways, I have the Classical Paradise, the Paradise Fallen, the Oceanic, and the Nostalgia palette. I also decluttered the Oceanic palette, but then they launched a reformulated version and I've bought the reformulated version. Now, I've only used that palette since repurchasing it once, but I wouldn't declutter that one. And here is my reasoning why. Because the one I would get rid of is Paradise Fallen, and only because I have so many purple eyeshadow palettes, like cool toned eyeshadow palettes, matte, like I just feel like I could replicate this color story in my collection easier than that blue-green palette, because I don't have a ton of blue-green. So that is why I'd get rid of this one. But it's a good thing this is fake, because I'm absolutely not getting rid of this one. This is one of my favorites. I'm just saying, if I had to, that would be the one I would get rid of. Next up, Anastasia Beverly Hills. I actually used to have a very large Anastasia Beverly Hills collection. I had the Prism palette, the Prism palette, the Subculture palette, the Sultry palette, the Soft Glam, Modern Renaissance, what else? Oh, Riviera. I think I had all of them, and then I decluttered all of them, and the only ones I have left are the Jackie Aina and Norvina Volume 5. I technically have Norvina's Volume 1 and 3. Like, they're sitting over there in my declutter pile. I think I got rid of them the last time I did a declutter, but they haven't left my house yet. So I felt like they're technically in a declutter pile, so I'm not counting them for this video because I've technically already decluttered them. So yeah, but I guess those would be the pick if I wasn't including them. But if I wasn't, it was between this one and the Jackie Aina one. I would get rid of this one for a similar reason. I have a bunch of purple eyeshadow palettes, and realistically, I don't need this many. So I could get rid of this and be okay. Next up is Beauty Bay. This is going to be a controversial pick. I only have 2 Beauty Bay palettes. I have the Book of Magic and the Wilderness. I'd get rid of Wilderness. Book of Magic has my heart and soul. It's a purple and like blue and mint color story. And so while this is a beautiful palette and I really like the quality of this palette and the color story, I wouldn't be willing to part with my Book of Magic palette, even though I do have a ton of purple shades. Like, I don't care, that's one of my favorite purple eyeshadow palettes. So I would be keeping that one. So that was more of like a declutter by process of elimination situation. Okay, Blend Bunny. I have the Surge palette and the Dollhouse. I'd have to declutter the Dollhouse only because I absolutely love the Surge palette, and while this palette is really pretty for like more toned down looks and I prefer the shimmer shades in this palette, There's something about that matte color story in the Surge palette that I just really like. So this would be the one I would have to get rid of, but I, again, am absolutely not doing that because this isn't real. Give Me Glow. I have two palettes from Give Me Glow. I have the Vivid Rose palette and the Bad Witch Club palette. Ironically, I had decluttered the Vivid Rose palette, then the Bad Witch Club palette came out, and I changed my mind on decluttering this and decided I'd rather have two palettes from the brand versus just the one. So I kept this and I have not used it since. I don't know why, because I love purples and, you know, pinks are fun too. So I'm not really sure what it is about this palette, but I just don't use it. And their very large pans overwhelm me. It just stresses me out because I'm like, there's absolutely no way I'm ever going to use all of that. So anyways, Huda Beauty. I debated on decluttering the blue-green palette that she recently launched because I didn't like the quality of that one. But I really like that cake liner. So then I decided I would get rid of the Wild Chameleon palette. This is the Obsessions palette that I think she came out with last year. It's just not that special of a color story in my collection. I feel like I could replicate this and I wouldn't really miss this one if it were gone. But I do like that palette. I just feel like I could find it somewhere else. Klee Beauty. I have 7 Klee palettes. I feel like I have all of them except for the Les Jardins Volume 1. But I have, I think, all the other palettes that they've ever launched. But the one that I would declutter is the Honoré palette. And only because it's more of a basic color story, although I'm not gonna lie, this shade Stolen Kiss, this like light pink metallic, is like, it's really pretty on the eyes, so I would miss it, but I just feel like I don't gravitate to this color story quite as much as I do the other Klee palettes, so that would be the one I'd be willing to part with. Next up is Kaleidos Makeup. I wouldn't declutter any of my Kaleidos palettes. I have 5. I have Astro Pink, Lunar Lavender, Electro Turquoise, Club Nebula, and Flower Punk. So if I was forced to, I would get rid of the Astro Pink. This is Futurism 3. And I debated on getting rid of Electro Turquoise, but I really like that color story. And the only reason that that was the first one that popped up is because one of my shades is shattered. So I feel like I'm working with a partial palette anyway. But I think I'd get rid of this one only because, again, this is a color story that I think I could replicate elsewhere in my collection. It's not the most unique color story that I have, so I would get rid of this one. But I'm not going to lie to you, that shade Light Year right here, that pink metallic, is really nice. And I really like the packaging on these. I want them to launch more of these palettes. These are fun. Or something else in the like shape that they did for Flower Punk. I also was a big fan of that. Okay, moving along. I don't love having to pick one of my Lethal Cosmetics palettes to declutter because the Nightflower palette, the 1UP, and the 1UP palettes are like 2 of my favorite palettes that I have so far this year. And so I don't want to declutter either of those. So that only leaves my other Lethal Cosmetics palette, which is the Lethal is Dead palette. And I am obsessed with Teresa is Dead, so I don't want to declutter this, but I also don't want to declutter the other 2. But I like the color story and the metallics. Actually, not even the color story. I like this color story. I like the formulation of the metallics in the other 2 palettes better than this formulation. So that's why I would keep those, but I do love this color story. This is such a fun palette too. So yeah, I wouldn't want to get rid of this, but I feel like I'd have to if in this situation, which I don't know what situation it would make me do one palette from each brand, but whatever. Lime Crime, I have 2 palettes. I have the Venus XL2 and the Greatest Hits Bangers palette. I would get rid of Greatest Hits Banger only because I've tried to declutter Venus XL2 like 3 different times, and then before I actually remove it from my house, I see something that makes me want to use it again, and then I use it again and I fall in love with it. So I just don't think I'd be successful in decluttering it, even though this palette does have like, I think 5 shades from that palette. There's something about that Venus XL2 palette that I'm obsessed with, but I also really like the quality of this palette. I like the shades and the color story that they created. This is a really fun palette to me, and I know a lot of people don't try it because Lime Crime, I think in the past was really controversial with their owner, and I think, I don't even know the whole thing, but they have like a new, I don't know. Anyways, lots of people don't like Lime Crime for that reason, so that's why most people don't talk about it, but I really like that palette. I don't think you can get it anymore, But if you can still get the, I think you can still get the Venus XL2, and you should get that one. Okay, Lois Cosmetics. I have Meet Me in the Underworld and Meet Me at Midnight, and I would declutter the Meet Me at Midnight palette because I don't love the shimmers in this palette as much as I love them in the Meet Me in the Underworld palette. So yeah, this one would be the one that would go. Lunar Beauty. I have 6 Lunar Beauty palettes. I think I have all of their palettes except the Nude Prism palette that launched this year, and then the Life's a Drag Facelift. And the reason I didn't buy Life's a Drag Facelift is because I had the original Life's a Drag. The only reason I picked this one is because this is the oldest palette, I think, in my entire collection, and the quality has gone down. I mean, this launched in 2018, and the open container is 12 months. So it's like 3 years beyond its shelf life. But this palette, we had good times together. I definitely was into neutrals at the time that I purchased this palette, so I really stuck to like that side of the palette, but I did have some fun. Like, this might have been what eased me into colorful looks, because I would occasionally pull in like up for a pop of color. So I do like this palette, but just because the quality's gone down over time, I would get rid of that one. Melt Cosmetics. If you watch my recent melt ranking video, I have 18 melt palettes. This would be the one I would get rid of, which is the 27 palette, which sucks because I was so excited to buy this palette for myself for my 27th birthday. But anyways, I'd get rid of this one only because this color story doesn't do much for me. I like pairing it with another palette that I'm going to declutter from another brand, so I figured if I'm getting rid of one, might as well get rid of both. But yeah, it's like an okay neutral color story. The shadow quality is nice. It's just not my favorite color story out of all my melt palettes, so that would be the one that would go. This one was super hard because from Menagerie Cosmetics, I have 2 palettes. I have the Sugar High palette and the Serenity palette. And I went with the Serenity palette only because while the Serenity palette has deeper mattes than the Sugar High palette, I like the shimmer choice in the Sugar High palette better than, like, I just don't love like super deep toned shimmers. So yeah, this would be the one I get rid of, but I don't really want to, so again, it's not one I'm actually decluttering, just one that I would, in theory, if I had to. From Natasha Denona, this was kind of a cheat. I don't even know where it went. Did it fall down? Oh, this is kind of a cheat. It's the mini nude palette. This is the only mini palette I have from Natasha Denona. It's actually really pretty, and I have no intention of actually decluttering it because I think it's stunning and perfect for travel, but I just like all of the midi and normal size palettes I have from her better, and this felt like the easy option. Like I said, I was kind of cheating on that one. Nomad Cosmetics. I would go with the Orient Express palette. While I absolutely adore the packaging on this palette and the theming, I don't know what to do with this color story beyond like neutral looks. I do reach for this to do neutral looks, but then I just feel lame because there's like this beautiful yellow, green, blue in here, and I just don't know what to do with it. So that would be the reason I would get rid of this one. Odins Eye. Again, not really cheating. It's kind of cheating. I went with the only mini palette I have from Odins Eye, which is the Erd palette. This is actually one of my favorite little mini color stories just because this shade, what is this one? I think it's Time or Golden Year. I don't know. It's like a split pan. It's this shade. It's one of my favorite eyeshadow shades I have, but I feel like I have other palettes that have a similar shade, so I could live without this one. But yeah, this one is, it is really pretty. So, but it's pretty, but it's not as pretty as the other palettes I have from Odins Eye, I guess. Next up is Pat McGrath. I would get rid of the Celestial Odyssey palette. I only have 2 palettes from Pat McGrath. I have this palette and the Bridgerton palette, and I love Bridgerton too much to get rid of that palette. So here we are. This palette is, it's okay. These shimmers are really pretty. They're not like the most amazing shimmers that I own, so I think I would live without this, and I don't like the mattes in that palette. So that is that. Sydney Grace. I have 4 palettes. I have all 3 of the palettes from the Temptalia collab, and then the Mel Thompson Tiny Marvels palette. The palette that I would get rid of is the On the Horizon palette, which makes me really sad because it's the palette that has the dog on it, but this color story is just more basic out of the other color stories, and I feel like this palette doesn't have the like really exciting shimmer shade that like melts my heart that the other two Temptalia palettes have. So that would be why I'd get rid of this one, but I do still really like this one, and I don't actually intend on getting rid of it. Honestly, Cosmetics, I would declutter the Strawberry Milkshake palette, which only because this palette doesn't have their like special shimmer formula, and I have the Don't Be Jelly and Lure palettes, which do have the more special shimmers. So yeah, I'd get rid of this one, but I think this is a really fun color story. So, you know, this actually probably would have been a good color story to mention in my good summer eyeshadow palettes. Didn't even think about that palette. Oops. Okay, Urban Decay. I've actually decluttered my Urban Decay collection significantly down to Born to Run and the Naked Wild West. And to be honest, I ask myself a lot, like, why I've kept this palette. I don't know. I don't have an answer for it. I think it's because of the shade Cowboy Rick. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I just really like this shade for some reason. This was not going to be a video where I swatched, but there's just something about it. I think it just because it like blends in with my skin tone and just gives like a shine. I'm a big fan of it. So I keep this palette around, and I'm from Arizona, so Teresa is Dead calls this the like Scottsdale Divorcee palette, which is like really funny to me, so I just can't part with it because those are my people, you know? Not that I'm a divorcee, but Scottsdale. I don't live in Scottsdale. I live in Phoenix, but anyways, still my people. So yeah, I would get rid of this palette though, because the Born to Run palette is my absolute favorite Urban Decay palette of all time. I want them to recreate that style of eyeshadow palette with like a different color story. I don't know why they haven't. I love that palette. Okay. Last one is Vizier. I'm obsessed with Vizier. I wouldn't actually declutter any Vizier palettes that I have because I love them all, but if I had to, I would get rid of the Paris Etoile palette, only because this is a palette that I could get these shades in other palettes that I have. So it's not super unique to my collection. So I could live without it if I had to, but I don't intend to. So anyways, those are all of the palettes that I would declutter from brands if I had to get rid of one palette. I don't even know, this is like such a long scenario. If I had to declutter one palette from every brand that I own, those were all the palettes that I would get rid of. There you go. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this kind of video. Let me know in the comments down below if you would like to see me do, if I could keep only one palette from each brand that I own. We could do that. For the brands where I only have two, you kind of already know the answer to which palette I would keep, but let me know if you want to do that, because I can do that. So yeah, let me know if you want to see that down in the comments below, or if you like this type of video and want to see more of this type of content, also let me know that. And with that, I will see you guys next time. Bye!